according to the clock on Eric's office wall, it's the clock. So I think there we go. So I think we can go ahead and get started. Call to order the Wednesday, May 27th, 2020 meeting
is now joining.
The Land Management Committee to order. And if we could take a roll, please.
Bob Zimmerman.
Here.
Bruce Grubb.
Here.
Chuck Henriksen. Dwayne Breitling. He's trying to call me right now. John Strand. I'm not picking up anything. John? John is on, correct?
He jumped off and I haven't seen him re-enter the meeting again. So I'm not sure what his status is.
Kevin Campbell?
Here.
Corey Peterson? Mary Shirley?
I am here.
Nathan Boomerbaum?
Here.
Roger Johnson? I'm sorry, Roger Olson?
Here.
Jonathan Judd?
Is that it?
Yep, that is it. We do have a quorum if we get John back.
All right.
Jenny Mojo is here.
Jenny, okay.
All right, great. We have the minutes to the previous, let me see, let's look at our agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda, Eric? Anything that needed to be added or anyone else?
I don't believe so.
Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Kevin moves to approve.
Thank you, Kevin. Is there a second? Is there a second, please?
I'll second. This is Nathan.
Thank you, Nathan. All those opposed to approving the agenda say aye. The motion carries, and we will move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which I must say are very detailed. A great resource. This is a complicated, maybe, I don't know, complicated. Yeah, it's complicated, but very complete, complete presentation, and I appreciate the thoroughness of the meeting minutes. Were there any changes, additions, or corrections to those minutes that anyone had? Motion to approve.
I'd move approval. This is Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
Roger, by Kevin.
Thank you, Roger or Kevin. All those opposed to approving the minutes of the previous meeting say aye. And the motion carries. Thank you. And we will move on now to item number 4, property acquisition status report. Take it away, Eric.
All right, thank you, Mary. Starting on page 11 of your packet, hopefully everybody has that. If not, I can certainly share my screen. But page 11 is the start the land status report. And I guess I'd probably refer your attention to page 12, which is the overall map.
Eric, if you can share your screen, I think that's really helpful for these meetings.
Okay, I will do that. Just a second. Okay. Hopefully you're seeing that now. So I'm going to scroll down to page 12. And hopefully you're able to see that. I'll zoom in a little bit. So the property status report is showing on the screen here on page 12 in your packets if you're following along with that. As you've seen, we're continuing to make progress. It's continues to be a handful of parcels, 5 to 10 acquisitions each month. We are over 300 and approaching 370 parcels acquired as you look in the legend here in the lower left side of the map. On the north end of the channel, you can see we're just about there with completing a couple of these township sections up on the north end. We do have a few purchase agreements that are in place up there as well. However, as you progress down south, you'll see that there's still quite a bit of blue, which means we're continuing to be in negotiations. There are a few parcels that are colored green and a couple that are purple. That means we're making a little bit of progress on the channel south of 94. And of course, a little bit of progress down in the Horace area and along parts of the upstream mitigation area. With all that blue progressing, that basically means negotiations are ongoing. We are following the statutory processes in North Dakota for water resource districts. That basically means we are following the steps associated in the century code related to quick take for water resource districts. And I'm not mentioning that in any sort of threatening fashion, but just mentioning it for people's awareness that, those are the steps we're having to follow. We've been having more and more discussions with county leadership and joint board leadership and some DA leadership regarding the status of those acquisitions. And if we're not able to be successful in reaching a conclusion, then, the heat kind of gets turned up in those negotiations as we progress. And so over the coming probably 6 months or so, we'll see, more activity in that regard. And I certainly don't want anybody to be surprised if we end up asking the county commission for approval to use quick take. But those steps would likely be coming here in the next few months, unless we're able to reach a conclusion. The rest of this report just shows you area by area where we're at with acquisitions, these cultural monitoring areas. You can see usual status from last month. Environmental monitoring areas, these are the biotic and geomorphic, both easements and rights of entries. So we've had quite a bit of activity on those acquisitions over the last few months, and continue to have more discussions with the handful of property owners. There were some court hearings recently that the courts have continued to side in our favor when we're asking for rights of entries. And so that is, I guess, making progress in that regard. I guess I would feel free to look through the status reports if anybody has comments or questions. One of our other focus areas right now is Southern Embankment Reach number 1. And we have 20 different parcels that we're working to acquire. We have purchase agreements signed on 2 of those. There is one property owner that owns about half of the parcels. And so quite a bit of discussion going on with that property owner, as well as all the other property owners. Otherwise, I guess I would be happy to take any comments or questions if there are any about the status report.
Thank you, Eric. I have a question regarding, do you feel like we're on time to meet our target dates? Which is still this fall, correct?
Yeah, still this fall. We are pressing as hard as we can on maintaining that time frame. I think good question, and I think this was a bit of a discussion last month as well. There are a couple areas where we are slipping behind schedule, and I think some of the reasoning there is, or some of the, I guess, excuse, if you will, is that the statutory process does require us to get a notice of receipt of all the different mailings that go out to the property owners. And so Chris McShane and his team over at Onstead Twitchell have been helping manage that along with staff from the joint board. And as you can imagine, if you're a property owner that is not in favor of, having your land acquired for the project, you're probably not real eager to get these mailings in the mail or from the postal service or FedEx or whatever it might be. We've also seen instances when the property owners are trying to avoid process servers, and so the time frame to get people served has taken longer than was originally estimated. We have recently revisited the assumptions that were made in our schedule, and we're, I guess, from this point forward, we're learning and adapting from those lessons learned. But that has caused a bit of delay in processing some of the letters and processing some of the notices out to property owners. And then in addition to that, it's just quite a bit of processing when we have I don't want to say a growing number, but a number of property owners that isn't shrinking as we have to walk through all of the various steps. It becomes quite a bit of paperwork, and I know the staff at from our land agents to my team to the team from Onsta Twitchell and the staff at the joint board, they all play a role in getting those notices and those letters out the door. And so it does become many hands in a cookie jar, and we have some good systems we're using to process all that. But people have the joint board staff, for example, they have day jobs, and so getting those letters and things out the door is quite the challenge. And I think we're making progress in that. But for those reasons, I think we are a little bit behind schedule. On Southern Embankment Reach 1, we're probably a month or so behind where we would like to be. The I-29 road raise is another area where the Corps is anxious, well, so are we, anxious to advertise and award that I-29 road raise project. And our acquisitions are a month or so behind what we would like to have in that area as well.
So what kind of effect does this have on the overall project?
I guess at this point, we're probably still assessing that. The bid dates should still allow for construction to occur in 21, which was always the anticipation for the channel and I-29 and Southern Embankment Reach 1. It perhaps compresses a little construction schedule, and we are working with the permitting agency from the state. For example, there seems to be willing to give us a conditional permit, conditioned that we will have the lands acquired prior to construction starting, but we may not have them acquired prior to advertising for bids, for example. And so there's some, I guess, maybe creative, but some flexibility that's being accommodated because of some of these durations of the land acquisition process.
Okay, great. And so then how are we doing with our budget? Budget-wise,
I maybe would defer a little bit more to Paul or others, but it's my understanding that we're tracking on budget. And there was recently a review of budgetary information, and I guess from my vantage point, our acquisition activities are coming in below our budgeted amounts, and so we're feeling pretty positive about that situation.
Great. Questions from the rest of the group? Questions or comments? Okay, then you did cover the BioChiana monitoring program. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
I would maybe just briefly mention on page 21 is a matrix showing the BioGeo acquisition status. Quite a bit of detail on here. Bottom line is we are continuing to make progress, and we've had, I think I mentioned before, we've had some continued success with the courts. Unfortunately, if we have to use the court process, that has been successful for us. The other thing I would just point out is ideally, we will ultimately get easements on all of the 376 parcels. We did resort to getting rights of entries on some of those when the property owners were reluctant to sign an easement, or in cases like in Minnesota, where all we were asking for at this point was a right of entry, but ultimately it is anticipated that we will need to secure easements. And so while we've made pretty good success, 349 of the 376 access agreements are in place. 150 of those are rights of entries that ultimately will need to be converted into an easement. So more work to be done there, but we are in a pretty good position right now to allow the Corps to do their monitoring programs this year.
Okay.
And Eric and Mary, this is Chris McShane. With respect to those rights of entry that are covering properties that we ultimately do want an easement on, part of the reason to have that right of entry is many of these people didn't want to sign an easement as it was currently drafted. Much of that was with respect to legal descriptions. Some of the legal descriptions were larger than maybe they absolutely needed to be. So by going out with that right of entry, we'll be able to narrow down the legal descriptions, hopefully get more of them signed with a more distinct or smaller legal description. And then we can, go forward to acquire the rest through other channels.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. Any other questions for either Eric or Chris or any of the other staff? Okay, then let's move on to item number 6, the Farmstead Reestablishment Program.
Yeah, thank you. In your packets on page 22 is the start of a handful of pages related to farmstead reestablishment. And in particular, we've called this the Rural Impact Mitigation Program. We did preview this with the committee last month, and I believe we sort of warned you or put you on notice that we would likely be coming back and asking for approval this month. And so in your packet is a cover letter along with some supporting information related to the Rural Impact Mitigation Program. We are asking the committee for a recommendation of approval. We will also be asking the Finance Committee for the same recommendation of approval, and ultimately the Board of Authority, Diversion Board of Authority, will be meeting tomorrow, and hopefully with this group and the Finance Committee's recommendations, they will approve this program. As mentioned last month, this program is in place, or we're proposing this program to be in place so that we have a mechanism to assist farmsteads and rural businesses with reestablishing. Many farmsteads, for example, have been added on to over years, and they may have buildings and grain storage equipment and facilities that are very functional, but yet from a market valuation standpoint, they don't appraise very high because they've been depreciated. And so it's going to be very challenging for a farmstead to use the proceeds from the buyout to rebuild a functioning farmstead with those proceeds. And so this program aims to provide some financial allowances for them to reestablish that farmstead or rural business in an area that's not impacted by the project. And those proceeds would be made available to them in the form of a forgivable loan. And the forgivable loan would be based on the premise that they would continue to operate their business or farmstead in the same function that they are operating it today. The forgivable loan we're proposing would be a 10-year term where for the first 5 years would be a fixed at the full value, and then it would step down 20% each year in the following 5 years until it is fully forgiven. And I guess the point of all that is we are using taxpayer dollars to potentially build brand new farmsteads or brand new pole barns or other facilities necessary for rural businesses. And we want to make sure that we're making those incentives so that the business and the sort of regional economy stays intact. We have estimated that this program will probably cost us between $5 to $10 million above what we've budgeted for these facilities. And I realize that that is not explicitly included in our budget, but I do think that there's probably some discussion about whether or not this is the right thing to do at any cost, or perhaps the right thing to do at a certain cost. And I think the feedback I've received is that this is probably the right program to provide with that cost range of the $10 million mark.
You need speed strength for football, right?
Jenny, was that a question for us? Okay. So anyway, that's kind of the framework for the plan. More details, of course, are presented in your packet. And of course, there's a lot more details that will be ironed out as we work with each of the displaced businesses. Last month, I think I informed the group that we've estimated there are 16 farmsteads that have some type of impact in the upstream mitigation area or by the footprint of the project. And there are also 9 commercial properties. Not all of them will need this program or even be eligible for this program, but it gives you some flavor of the number of properties that we know of today. And you can see a map of where these properties would be located. So the reason we are asking for approval right now for this is we are working with a few of these farmsteads, well, one of the farmsteads in particular and one rural business right now. And we're anticipating that more and more of them are going to want to, reach out and start the process of reestablishment and appraisal and whatnot. And so we are in a position where we would like to be able to utilize this program, and I guess delaying action sort of has some ramifications on our acquisition program. So I'll pause there, see if there's comments, questions.
Okay, Eric, would you say that this policy or program would be consistent with the other commercial acquisitions we've made in downtown Fargo, for example, with Midwest Steel and the Howard Johnson and Fargo Schools? Or how does it differ?
Yeah, no, I think there are quite a few similarities, and especially as you start thinking about some of the the residential components of Oxbow were different, but yet there's some similarities here. And I'm not asking us to go back and repeat what we did in Oxbow, but I think we learned a lot of lessons in Oxbow about how to rebuild houses. And in this situation here, one of the provisions of this program is that we would be leaning on some experts to help us establish the allowance. And so we've had discussions with some experts from NDSU about having them help establish what is considered functionally equivalent. If you look at a farmstead that's been maybe added on to over 20, 30, 50 years, they've got a dozen different grain bins of various sizes. They've got 5 or 6 outbuildings. If you were to go rebuild that today, you probably would build it in a different fashion. And so what is considered functionally equivalent? We are going to be looking at expertise from NDSU and perhaps other resources that can help us define what is functionally equivalent and what's the cost of that functionally equivalent farmstead, for example. And then that would really set the allowance. And so that was one of the lessons learned we had from Oxbow related to the Mid-America Steel and other commercial properties in downtown, the Fargo schools, that sort of thing. I do think that this program provides consistent treatment from what we had done with those businesses to what we're proposing to do with the rural businesses and rural farmsteads.
And have you had any particular feedback from any of these property owners or anyone else that might have an opinion on it? I'm just wondering what your feedback has been.
We have previewed this with the Cass County Joint Board Of course, there's some farmers on that group, and I think they've given a thumbs up and a head nod that this is headed in the right direction. We've shared bits and pieces of this with some of the farmers that we are working on. And the other thing I would mention is that this program is modeled after a successful program that was implemented in I guess, central Minnesota, a different project, but with a group of real estate attorneys that are currently representing a lot of property owners on our project. And so we do think that there is some value where we're picking up with the lessons learned and picking up with the successful programs that they were able to implement and trying to apply them to our project here. So I think there has been some good vetting. It hasn't been fully vetted, of course. I was a little bit hesitant to do that when I don't know if I've got the full support of the board, for example. But generally speaking, the feedback I've received so far has been pretty positive.
Great, thank you. Other committee members, comments or questions? Then what we're looking.
Mary, this is Roger.
Thank you, Roger.
Yeah, I think this program is going to do a nice job of helping to reestablish the farmsteads that we're going to affect. The joint board made some comments, and I think we are pretty much in agreement. I think that with the expertise that we're going to bring on board, it'll really maybe help flush out some things that maybe aren't considered in this, but can be taken care of. So I think this is an excellent way to handle these farmsteads, and I support it. And if you're looking for a motion, I would make the motion to accept this and pass it on to the Diversion Authority.
Thank you, Roger. So it's been moved to recommend to the Diversion Board of Authority to establish this policy. Is there a second?
This is Bob. I'll second it.
Thank you, Bob. You've heard the motion and the second. Is there further discussion? Any further discussion? Then roll call, please.
Bob Zimmerman,
Aye.
Bruce Grubb,
Aye.
Jenny Maggio, John Strand, Kevin Campbell,
Aye.
Jenny Mojo.
Is now exiting.
Mary Sherling,
Aye.
Nathan Borbaum,
Aye.
Roger Olson,
Aye.
Okay, I think that's it. The motion carries. I believe that we did have enough for a quorum there, did we not?
Correct.
Oh,
Mary, this is Nathan. I don't know if you noticed on the chat feature here that it looked like John Strand and Jenny both voted yes for it.
yes, I thank you for pointing that out. I just see that now. So, Don, you want to note that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thanks for pointing that out, Nathan. Okay, then let's move on to item number 7, the planned outreach to property owners. Who's got that?
Yeah, I can take that. I don't have any handouts for the committee today, but I wanted to make sure everybody was aware that we have been working towards developing a pretty comprehensive and a thorough outreach plan to the property owners impacted both by the Southern Embankment and the upstream mitigation area. And our plan for that outreach well, the plan to enact that outreach is based on receipt of the CLOMR from FEMA, as well as approval of the mitigation plan from the state engineer. Those items, excuse me, those items we do anticipate, I guess, happening here in the next month or so. I guess the timing's a little bit uncertain, but we are preparing for the event that we do get the CLOMR and that we do get approval of the mitigation plan. Once those items are received, our intention is to have a letter from the executive director explaining that we've reached certain milestones, as well as a letter from the acquiring entity. And so on the North Dakota side, that would be the Cass County Joint Board. And on the Minnesota side, that would be the MCCJPA. In addition, in that packet of information to the property owners, we would have some maps showing them the overall project and overall mitigation areas. And we would also have individual maps showing their property or properties and how the project is impacting those properties. And then to help with explanation of mitigation programs and acquisition process, we'll have some informational flyers that are included in this packet of information as well. And so it's probably going to end up being, I guess maybe 10, 12 pages of information, which might be considered to be a lot, but I think in our conversations and feedback, most people are looking for more information. And I know in some of our outreach planning efforts, we've heard feedback from some of you that property owners are looking to have more details. So we'd be looking to share that information with the property owners. Roughly, there's 625 parcels and over 400 property owners. And so it does get to be a pretty decent sized effort. The modeling team is ready to produce those maps and have a good system in place to sort of customize those maps for each individual parcel. And we are working on the informational sheets that summarize some of the key components of the mitigation plan. Regarding the mitigation plan, we've been in contact with the state engineer. They are reviewing. They've indicated they might have a few final comments or questions for us this week, and we do anticipate being able to address those comments and questions. We are asking for approval by the end of the month, which is just a few days away. So hopefully we're able to get that turned around. If the end of the month is a bit too sporty, then we would look to have approval prior to the next legislative water topics meeting, which is scheduled for June 4th. And so those things are coming up pretty quick. And I guess we're anxious to get that information available and shared with the impacted property owners. So happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Eric. I think that's really important to get that information to property owners as soon as we can. And I would assume that this would be really appreciated by folks. Who's got questions? Or any other comments? And when do you plan on doing all of that?
Well, so at this point, maybe Nathan or Bob can add on, but at this point, I'm anticipating that we're still probably, I'd say within a month of hearing from FEMA. And our goal would be to be ready to send these letters and packets out within a week or two after we receive the news from FEMA. And so, at this point, it looks like it could be late June, maybe slipping into early July. I think I would echo your sentiments, Mary, that people are generally looking for more information. I don't know that they're going to love the information, but I think we have a duty to share it with them, and that's part of the process.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I want to make sure that everybody feels like they can participate here, even though it's not as great as sitting face to face. I really encourage people, if they have any anything they'd like to add, to please do that. This is where we have an opportunity to flesh issues out. I don't know, Eric, have you heard from members of the public much on any of your activities lately? Things have seemed like they're a little quieter, but maybe that's just because so many of us are remote and we're not having conversations as we maybe have in the past. But are you hearing anything on the streets? Anything that needs to be addressed?
Yeah, I guess I'd maybe go back to my comments earlier in the meeting regarding the negotiations. You know, we continue to have some pushback from property owners where, you know, they're advocating that their land is worth development land prices or, you know, near development land prices. And, you know, our appraisers are suggesting that it's still, you know, decades away from being development ready. And so we have this battle over, you know, what's the land worth? And we certainly understand that, you know, at some point, 20, 30, you know, 40 years from now, maybe some of these properties will be ready for development. But frankly, that's not the situation today. And so that seems to be a somewhat of a common theme in many of the negotiations that we're having. So.
Okay. Comments, questions for Eric? Then let's move on to item number 8, our committee update for the DA board.
Madam Chair, this is Executive Director Paulson, if I may.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to suggest and point out for agenda item number 6, the rural farmstead mitigation discussion that we just had. We do have that as an agenda item on the Finance Committee as well. And might I suggest that the motion for recommendation be moved to Finance before the board, so we can have a discussion. You know, given the nature of the potential budget increase, I feel I'd like to have Finance weigh in as well and make a recommendation to the board. So maybe just a suggested procedural change there.
I'm not quite sure what you'd like us to do. We've already made a motion on that to move it on to the DA board. There's nothing stopping the Finance Committee from weighing in as well. I guess my only consideration, you know, is when you talk to the Finance Committee, that from a policy standpoint, Land Acquisition Committee feels, you know, with 100% support that this is a good policy, that we should move forward with it. So I guess, you know, how the Finance Committee wants to weigh that would be up to them.
That's fine, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make the suggestion. So we'll move forward as you have intended here.
Does anyone else want to weigh in on this? My concern is that people feel like they're being treated fairly. And, you know, we have, I think, treated businesses fairly in this process, and I want to make sure that we are treating our farm businesses just as fairly. And you know, we have learned a lot, and I think with NDSU's help, we can move forward with this, and hopefully people will feel okay when this is all done. That's my feeling on it, and you heard Roger's support for it. And I'm certainly willing to hear anyone else that would like to have any comments on this. So I would certainly hope that the Finance Committee could see their way clear to support this as well.
That sounds fine. Sorry to interrupt, Madam Chair.
Oh, no, not at all. Well, then let's move on. Anything else we want to talk about? So we got off track a little bit here, but let's go back to the DA board meeting. Item number 8.
Yeah, on your screen here is a summary of some points that I thought we could share with the DA board tomorrow as kind of a status update from the land committee. This sort of summarizes the acquisition status program and some of the activities that we've talked about here. Just in a nutshell, again, we've had a handful of acquisitions approved. This last month there was 10 approved. We do have these processes in place through the quick take steps, formal offers, invites to the joint board, notice of intent, and so you can see we're progressing through, and we've got quite a few parcels there. Farmland leases are nearly all in place. The one that's being worked on is just related to a little small land swap up on the north end of the channel. Should be in place very shortly. BioGeo, again, I think I talked through all that. Mitigation plan has been submitted to the state engineer for approval. Ag risk study that was presented last month, and those presentations have been posted to the project website. The farmstead relocation plan is what we were just discussing. And on the crop insurance piece, we did have a kickoff meeting with the group from Watson Associates here in the last month. So I thought this could be shared with the DA board as part of our update tomorrow.
It looks great. I think it summarizes things quite nicely. Obviously, land acquisitions have been very, very busy and very engaged. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add to it? Are we missing anything? Seems pretty complete to me. So yeah, that'd be great. Do you need any action? I don't think so.
No, I'll coordinate with you, Mary, on how we want to convey those points to the board tomorrow, but should be in good shape.
Okay, and do you plan on sharing your screen like you're doing today at that meeting, or how do you plan on doing that?
I anticipate that there will be a screen share. I guess I can work with Joel and Paul on the exact mechanics of that.
Okay, yeah, I think it's personally, with all of these virtual meetings we've been doing lately, I like our presentation probably just as well as, if not better than, any of the other ones that we've done. So I think it's very informative, especially for people that maybe want to review the meeting later on so they can see what we're talking about. Okay, then let's go on to the joint board update. Roger, do you have that, or who's got that?
Yeah, Chairman, I've got that. I think Eric did a nice job of talking about the acquisition process and how, we as a joint board do have some struggles with as the appraisals come in and they go back out as offers, and the counter offers come back from the landowners, and some of them are very reasonable counter offers, and some are not. So we have questioned land agents and why is there such a disparity in the value of these properties? Why does the landowner think his is worth 50, 75, even 100% more than what we're offering? And I think Eric mentioned that some feel that their land is development land and is not being considered as that in the appraisal. So we do struggle with that. We are moving forward, and when those offers that come that seem to be way off base, we will send them back for negotiation, and so that's why you see there's several in negotiation yet. that we have sent back and not approved. But the process is lumbering forward, and as we continue, we know that these negotiations will get tougher, and the ones that the people that hold out, well, we want to make sure that everyone is treated on an equal basis. So we're going to hold to our, we're going to hold to the rules that we're abiding by, and we'll continue at that with those rules until something changes. So.
Well, I appreciate that, Roger, and I appreciate the difficult task that your group is handling very, very well. I think, but just from my perspective, I want to make sure that everyone's treated fairly, and if you're not the best negotiator, that shouldn't mean that you're treated any less than somebody that's an excellent negotiator. So I just want to make sure that all landowners are getting a fair shake on this. So appreciate that input. Anyone else have any comments or questions for either Roger, and I think Chris McShane is available as well, if anybody has any questions for either of them. Okay, then let's move on to the Minnesota side. Kevin, do you want to take that?
Yeah, is Mayor Judd on?
I don't think he is.
Okay, then I will. We did have a special meeting of the MCC JPA earlier on in the month of May. The reason for that is we had a couple of landowners who were interested in a buyout, and those properties are in the staging area, important to us. And so we did hold a meeting, and we did approve a final appraisal on one parcel of land that it's a long, narrow parcel of land along the river. And so we agreed to a price on that. And through the negotiation process, there was the landowner had requested some rights to continue, or exclusive rights for hunting privileges for a period of time. And we had a little bit of discussion about that and determined that we didn't have a problem with that, provided that the superseding authority on hunting in Minnesota is the DNR. So as long as they're okay with it, that was that. That property is one that we'll probably be able to resell at a later date. It's but it was good for us to be able to work with the landowner on that, and it was kind of a time-sensitive deal. That's why we held a special meeting. There was one other property that's in negotiation as well, and I don't know if Eric has anything to add on that, but that was the extent of our meeting, and we do have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Yeah,
Eric?
Nothing really further to address. We do have a few items on the agenda for the MCC JPA board tomorrow. So they'll be meeting and considering those, some of our contracting actions with land firms.
That's what I have for you today, Mary.
Okay, thank you so much, Kevin. Appreciate it. Appreciate all of you folks that are working on the Minnesota side for those acquisitions. Adam Altenberg, are you here for MetroCOGS? Give us a little update.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm here. Very brief update on the Agassiz Greenway study. We had a study review committee meeting for the study this morning. We spent most of that time doing the final review of the trail network assessments, some of the preferred concepts that we've developed. benefits case and how this could potentially be implemented over the next 20 to 35 years. With that, we're giving our project partners until the end of next week, I believe June 5th, to review that and provide any additional comments that could be implemented into a final draft. Another thing to note, we've put finishing touches on a 4.5-minute promotional video, which we're looking to share with the community, that discusses some of the potential recreation and non-recreation features that have been developed as part of this plan. We'll begin to share that later next week. We'll have links to that both on our website and potentially with some of our project partners as well. I think I noted last time we decided that any public engagement that we do will be virtual. So we have decided, and we are preparing to do a webinar presentation with a Q&A session on Tuesday, June 16th from noon to 1. With that, we'll have links to the meeting both through Zoom and through MetroCOGS Facebook page, and we'll be spreading the word on that here later this week and next week. And I guess lastly, with additional information, depending on what the schedule looks like in June or July, we should be ready to do a more formal presentation with this committee as well as other jurisdictions and park districts to get additional feedback before we look for adoption with this plan either later this summer or early fall. But I believe that's all I have to share to you today. If you have any brief questions at this time.
Thank you, Adam. Well, I would certainly think, especially since everybody's been so cooped up, that there's got to be some enthusiasm for your proposal. The question is going to be where the money is going to come from, but we certainly want to make sure that we incorporate what we can, so that we don't slap ourselves 20 years from now and say, gee, we should have laid this groundwork so we could do this now. So that's my thought anyway, but certainly entertain other people's opinions or thoughts or questions for Adam on this. I know the green space that the county used to own, and we did a lot of flood buyouts along the river over the years through FEMA, and eventually gave that to the Fargo Park District, and it's very, very popular. So there's certainly a lot of enthusiasm and I think need for these more rural kinds of areas that, and now of course with the COVID gardens and all of those, different ideas you've come up with, I can certainly see that there's a ton of potential. The big question is, how's it going to get paid for? Because I think we're going to be struggling with our budgets going forward here and being pulled in a lot of different directions. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay, then. Is there any other business? We've got 6 minutes left before finance kicks us out. Well, I appreciate everyone being here today, and I hope everybody's staying well. Thank you all for being here. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second by Kevin.
Thank you. We are adjourned then. Thanks so much, everyone.